Hi there, I'm Andrea Oden, and I am a high performance coach. If we are meeting for the very first time, I'm here to help you unlock your full potential as a high performing leader. What I do is simple yet powerful. I take leaders out of the shadows and onto the main stages of their organization. I help female leaders get seen, get known, and get paid. For over 20 years, I've helped leaders transform their careers using the same game changing strategies and principles that I used to rise from secretary to well respected HR director to six-figure consultant and now CEO of Air Network. At Air Network, we are on a mission to empower women to aspire boldly, to inspire intentionally, and to require a fearless rise to the top. We call ourselves the Air Tribe. And today I am thrilled to kick off a powerful session where we dive into one of the most underrated superpowers of leadership: listening. And not just listening to what's being said, but listening to hear the future. This is about learning to anticipate. This is about leading with vision and creating extraordinary impact. Get ready to step into your next level of greatness by listening. So, why are we talking about listening? Isn't that something that we do every day without even thinking about it? Well, yes and no. While we may physically hear words that are being spoken to us, true listening goes much deeper than that. It's about being fully present, actively engaged, and truly understanding the meaning behind the words. As leaders, your ability to listen isn't just a skill, it's a secret weapon that can transform your team and amplify your career. Leaders who listen, really and truly listen, these are the leaders that everyone wants to follow. This is the first of a three-part series where I'm going to share with you the method of listening. And yes, there is a method to it, and it's more impactful and it's easier than you realize. I'm going to share strategies for listening to people, and you'll also learn how to start listening to your company, because your organization is telling you everything you need to thrive, but only if you know how to hear it. And finally, you will learn how to listen to the future. Yes, I said future. And because there is a way that you can position yourself so that you are always prepared for what's coming next. But before we get started, I want to give you a little pop quiz. There are no wrong or right answers. I'm not even going to ask you to write them down. The only person who will ever hear the answers is you, because you're going to answer questions about your listening skills. So let's go. True or false? I get distracted by my own thoughts during conversations with others. When speaking to others, I turn off my phone and give them my full attention. True or false? I tend to make quick judgments while listening to someone share. I make a conscious effort never to interrupt someone who's speaking. I hold back my opinion or my advice unless I'm specifically asked for it. I sometimes think about my response while the other person is still talking. true or false. I ask thoughtful questions to understand the other person's perspective better. I pay close attention to the speaker's body language, true or false. Without even knowing your answers to these questions, here's what I know. You are not a good listener, and neither am I. We all struggle with this thing called listening. So now that we've pretty much determined that we all are horrible at listening, let's take a look at the different types of listeners. I believe that leaders can be grouped into 8 distinct categories based on their listening styles. So, what kind of listener are you? Here's a list of the 8 listener types. Let's take a look at each one. First, there's the multitasker. This listener is easy to spot because they're doing other things. They're sometimes tapping their foot or looking at their watch. They're glazing around the room. Some of you right now today during this presentation, you're checking emails and you're pulling up your Facebook account. You are a multitasking listener. This listener comes across to the other person as rushed or disengaged, and they're eager to get to the next thing. Multitaskers often juggle multiple things while you are trying to talk to them, making it difficult for you to have the conversation because they have made it clear that their focus is elsewhere. Do you know any multitask listeners? Next, there's the interrupter. The interrupter has a habit of cutting you off mid-sentence, disrupting the natural flow of the conversation. They're impatient, oftentimes believing that what they have to say is more important than what you're saying. Rather than actively listening, they're simply waiting for a pause to jump in. They try to finish your sentences, assuming they already know where the conversation is going. This habit can be both frustrating and counterproductive. Which brings us to the selective listener. Selective listeners pay attention only to parts of the conversation, and it's usually the parts that align with their interests or their own agenda. They catch the big picture, but often miss the details, requiring frequent reminders of important points. They're engaged in pieces of the conversation, but they fail to absorb everything you're saying. What about the my turn listener? This person isn't truly listening at all. They're just biding their time until it's their turn to speak. While they might nod along and appear attentive, their focus is busy internally because they are crafting their next point rather than engaging with what you're saying. And as a result, their responses often miss those subtle nuances of the conversation. I'm sure everybody knows this kind of listener, especially if you are the parent of a teenager. This is the combative listener. The combative listener's approach to conversations is with a defensive or even hostile mindset. They're not listening to understand, they're listening to find flaws, to find disagreements, or ammunition to push back on later. They thrive on conflict and often shift the blame, escalate discussions into arguments. Conversations with them can feel aggressive and draining. This is the just the facts listener. This type of listener shows little regard for the individual or the context of the situation. They are solely focused on the facts. They fail to recognize that emotions are a form of fact. These listeners often respond to concerns with dismissive phrases like, well, that's just how it is. Or they say things like, well, that's what the company says we got to do. That's what we got to do. And when you start to respond with your feelings, they say something like, that's not true. They have little interest in building connections by exploring deeper meanings. And if your words convey emotions rather than cold, hard facts, they simply tune out. Number 7 is the action hero listener. The action hero is always on the lookout for a problem they can solve. And while they're listening, their attention is focused on identifying an issue and jumping in with a solution. They often cut the conversation short to offer advice, and that may not even be what the speaker needs. These are the ones to say, let me take that. I got it. I'll take care of that for you. Their intentions are good because they intend to help and make things easier for you, but their approach can often feel dismissive or overly solution focused. The action hero listener will swoop in with her cape every time and save the day, whether you want her to or not. And finally, there is the empath listener. The empath is truly in tune with the emotions and the experiences of others. They listen with genuine care, striving to understand the speaker's perspective and their feelings. Their presence is often very comforting and reassuring, creating a safe space for others to open up. However, empaths can sometimes struggle to separate their own emotions from those of the speaker, causing the conversation to shift toward their feelings. Have you ever told someone a problem and they immediately tell you about a time when something similar happened to them? And in the next few minutes, they're reliving their experience, dragging you in. And while their empathy feels good, it doesn't solve a problem. Simon Sinek explains to us that listening goes beyond simply hearing the words. It's the art of truly understanding what's being communicated. So, what are the skills to listening? There are 3 rules to listening: create space, hold space, and leave space. Creating space is all about being fully present in the conversation. This means setting aside distractions, putting your phone down, turning off notifications, and focusing entirely on the person in front of you. When you create space, you signal to the other person that their thoughts and feelings matter. Creating space is the only part of the listening experience that is about you. It is about you preparing yourself to come into the conversation. Next is holding space. Holding space requires compassionate, active listening without the need to control or fix the situation. It's about holding space for the speaker, holding space for their emotions. This might mean allowing moments of silence, resisting the urge to interrupt, and refraining from offering unsolicited advice. Holding space is about holding that safe space that you created, holding the space and making sure it is a safe place for someone to share. So you create the space and then you hold the space. You make sure that this space is protected and safe at all costs. And then there's leave space. Leave space is about leaving the conversation with more understanding than when you entered it. This means reflecting in the moment on what's being shared. This means asking meaningful questions and taking something valuable away from the exchange. Leaving space allows you to literally leave space for lessons learned and leave space for future connection. It's also about leaving space for the solution. One of the hardest things for me as a leader to learn, especially when it comes to listening, was as we saw in the video. I didn't realize that it was okay to just be present. It's okay to create space and hold space And it's okay to come back and revisit the conversation again. I'd react in the moment and say things. And then in the middle of the night, I'm saying to myself, oh, I wish I hadn't have said that, or I wish I could have said this. And I didn't realize for a very long time that I can sit and create space and hold space and hear what needs to happen. And then I can go back and process, and I can come back to the conversation another time. I didn't realize that that's something that you could do, because in reality, the person had time to process. They knew they were coming to talk to you, and they've been preparing for the conversation while you are in the moment and you haven't had time. And so when we talk about leaving space, it's okay to leave the space without the solution, because the solution may happen organically. Now that we know the rules to listening, let's talk a little bit about what listening is not. It's not about agreeing or disagreeing. You can listen, create space, hold space, leave space without ever agreeing or disagreeing. Listening is also not about correcting the facts, because even if we hate to admit it, feelings are someone's facts. And listening is not about you. Listening is all about the other person. Oftentimes, the solution to the problem happens organically as the person shares. Sometimes they come to their own conclusions. Sometimes they just want to be heard. And sometimes the conversation starts to gear itself towards the solution automatically. Leaders who listen are the leaders that everyone wants to follow. But what happens when nobody listens to the leader? One of the worst things that can happen in your career is when people stop listening, because you can't lead people who don't trust you enough to listen to what you say. Let me introduce you to the law of E.F. Hutton. E.F. Hutton was a prominent Wall Street brokerage firm founded in 1904. It gained notoriety for its slogan. And the slogan was, when E.F. Hutton talks, people listen. And that is the law of E.F. Hutton when it comes to leadership. When it comes to leadership, the law of E.F. Hutton says, when the real leader speaks, people listen. Meet Miss Betty. I call her Betty Hutton, because I found out that when Miss Betty talks, people listen. A few years ago, I was invited to conduct a training session for a team of a senior vice president who was struggling to connect with her team, and it was starting to affect the team's performance. She'd been hired from outside of the organization, and despite being in her role for over a year, she hadn't yet built trust and the rapport necessary to lead effectively. So I was brought in to help uncover the problem. To address the problem, we gathered the team together, the entire team, and I decided to play a leadership game. And the game is designed to foster connection and really just get people talking. So I began by explaining the rules to the game, and then decided to do a few practice rounds so that everyone could see how much fun it is and how engaging it is. So I asked the first question, and the room fell silent. No one responded at all. Eventually, I picked someone. I picked a guy and asked him to answer the question. And the strangest thing happened. Before he spoke, he glanced over to the other side of the room at a woman. He answered, and she smiled. The next question, the exact same thing happened. I called on a woman, and she did the same thing. She looks at this older woman on the other side of the room. This happened 4 times. So, taking the hint, I decided to ask her a question. Now, let me be clear. She wasn't rude. She didn't have a funky look on her face. She was smiling, and she actually looked kind of proud when they would talk. So it wasn't like she was this, downy person who was trying to wreak havoc. It wasn't that at all. So I decided to ask her a question. So I asked her a question, and without hesitation, she responded. And the entire room starts nodding and smiling. I thought they were going to clap. It was like Oprah had said something, and everybody was just waiting for their car, right? And so it became clear to me that the true leader in this room was Miss Betty. Miss Betty was a loved and trusted team member who had been a supervisor for over 25 years. In that room, at that moment, there were 20 supervisors, 4 managers, a director, a senior director, a vice president, and me. But Miss Betty, in every sense of the word, was the E.F. Hutton in that room. When she spoke, everyone listened, and when she didn't, nobody moved. Realizing the dynamic of what was going on, I called for a 15-minute break. And I pulled Miss Betty aside out into the hallway, and I explained the rules to the game. And I asked Miss Betty if she would be willing to take over and facilitate the game. She smiled and she agreed. And when we returned to the room, everything changed. The moment she stood in front of the room, the energy shifted. People were suddenly engaged and eager to participate. Hands were raised, and it was so much fun. And the game became a success. And we got to the root of the problem. This experience can teach us a valuable lesson. Leadership isn't about titles or credentials. True leaders are the ones who earn trust and influence through their actions and their connections with those around them. True leaders are the people who listen to others, and in turn, others listen to them. So let me ask you, who is the E.F. Hutton that you are listening to? When it comes to your career, are you listening? Because there's a lot of talking going on around you. There's a lot of noise. Your job is to make sure that you're listening to the right people and you're listening to the right conversations. Today, we've spent time talking about listening to people. In our next session, we're going to learn how to listen to your company. Because believe it or not, your company is speaking. Every day, your company is talking. In our next session together, we're going to talk about how to listen to what your company is saying. Inside every organization, there's what's called a business life cycle. This cycle is always evolving in your organization. First is the startup. This is the starting point where businesses find their footing. This is the laying the foundation for the future. Next, there's the growth stage. This is where businesses start to gain momentum. The company starts rapidly growing, and all the resources are directed towards expanding and growing the company. This is where money is being spent, where hiring is happening, where the company is constantly building and hiring. Next, there's the maturity stage. This stage is about stabilizing the company. Once all that growth happens, now we've got to stabilize it. This is where the company starts to refine processes, to optimize efficiency, and they start to maintain a strong presence in the marketplace. Next is decline. And it doesn't matter how successful the company is, this is an inevitable phase, the decline phase. This is where the company stops growing so rapidly. They might still be growing, but not as rapidly as they were in the growth phase. This is where things start to level off, where they have been holding steady for a period of time. This is where the industry starts to change, and you start to see competitors maybe launching new products, or the competitors start to get close in competition to you. The company starts to see challenges that may threaten the future. Think about Blockbuster. This is where a lot of companies get stuck and go out of business. Blockbuster got lost in this stage. They grew really quickly. They had stores everywhere. They matured, but when the industry started to change and the decline started to happen, they did nothing. What they should have done was move to the next phase, which is innovation. This stage is about reinvention. Businesses start to invest in cutting edge technologies or new strategies and groundbreaking ideas to stay ahead of the change that the environment is showing that's going to start happening. It's not always about creating new products, and sometimes it is, but it really is about ensuring that they're adapting to the environment, adapting to the industry changes and the world around the company. This is where sometimes companies roll out new products or they roll out new platforms. Think about Xfinity Mobile when Comcast got into the mobile business. That's an innovation stage where you take what you've had and you build on it. The final stage is called scale and expand. And this stage focuses on strategic expansion into new markets and leveraging the success of the past. Businesses start to scale with both the customer in mind and the global landscape of the organization. Again, we go back to Xfinity Mobile. When Comcast decided to go into that market, they leveraged their past success to build on something new. And so that's how they were able to scale and expand. Now, that's not where it stops because companies don't stay in the scale and expand. Eventually, after they've scaled and expanded and they start to get new customers, they start to get innovative ideas, they go back to the startup phase and it starts all over again. In our next session, we're going to dig deep into listening to what your company is saying. You're also going to listen to what your department is saying. And for homework, yes, there is homework, but it's easy. Following this presentation, you're going to receive this link, and the link includes a workbook to everything that we've talked about today. And your homework assignment is to exercise the 3 rules of listening in every conversation that you have with anybody from now until we meet together again. The 3 rules to listening, again, are create space, hold space, and leave space. And every week, you're going to give yourself a listening grade. The goal is to just get better. Every day, we fall into the patterns of those 8 types of listeners. And it's not something that we're taught to listen. Think about it. When you're a baby, you're taught to talk, not to listen. So we all have a deficit in this area. The goal is to get better. The goal is to know, did I create space in this conversation? Did I hold space? How did I leave the space? How was the other person feeling when we ended the conversation? Here's a quote from my mom. My mom says, if you listen long enough, the real story and the real person will show up. Oftentimes, we don't listen long enough. So because we don't listen long enough, the real story never gets told. And because we don't listen long enough, we never meet the real person. I want to say thank you so much for joining this powerful session today. Your commitment to growing as leaders and making an impact is truly inspiring. Remember, every step you take to listen, to connect, and to lead with purpose brings you closer to achieving remarkable results with your team and your career. Stay bold, stay driven, and never stop learning. And keep listening, because leaders who listen are the leaders everyone wants to follow. I'm Coach Andrea Oden, and I will see you soon.